Welcome back to the TMDSAS podcast. This is your host, Enrique Jasso, the coordinator of the Texas Health Education Service in the TMDSAS office in Austin, Texas. On today's episode, we'll be talking about journaling. It's a common topic that comes up in health professions advising settings, but we don't really have a how-to on what pre-health students should be doing when it comes down to journaling. And so I've recruited the help of Shannon Gutheil, the Health Professions Office Coordinator at the University of Texas at Austin, to address journaling. And this works really well in conjunction with an article that I wrote for the Apply magazine in the 2019 edition. If you'd like to download that, check out the description of this episode. It's a really helpful article, and I'm not just saying that because I wrote it. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and talk to Shannon. I'm extremely excited to have this guest with us today. It's Miss Shannon Gutheil from the UT Austin Health Professions Office. She's back with us. Her last episode, which was on reducing anxiety and stress, has actually been a really well-received episode. And so I wanted to have her back with a few more points on personal development and personal reflection to help a lot of our applicants who are struggling a little bit with that, or who want to take it a step further and be more prepared for their application. So Ms. Gutheil, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me, Enrique.
All right. Well, I wanted to just dig right into this and just mention that this episode of the podcast came to be because I actually wrote one of the articles in the newest edition of the Apply magazine that TMDSAS produces. And the topic that I covered was on journaling and how to start your pre-health journal. And so Ms. Gutheil and I actually have a little bit of a history in working together on similar topics. And so I thought she would be a great guest to help us expand those ideas a little bit further and really give our listeners actionable items that they can take back and start implementing right away. And so kind of jumping right into it, I wanted to ask the question, what is it that we mean by journaling?
Well, Enrique, I really think that the goal of journaling is to help the person that's journaling to reduce the kind of complexity that's in their mind, and also to help them provide clarity. It also helps them kind of keep on track with their activities. It allows them to reflect, plan out a schedule, and organize their thoughts. So it's kind of a place that they can go to jot down notes, to track kind of their experiences.
And it does it very effectively. I've actually taken on the practice of journaling recently, and it's been such an amazing experience for me to be able to write down the things that I need to cover and don't lose ideas or that I have throughout the day. And it's actually been very helpful with planning out the podcast and being a lot more deliberate on the types of episodes that we bring our listeners, and also with other areas of my professional and personal life.
Absolutely. It also helps you look back at what you've done and your history of kind of where you've come to when you look at where you're at in the present day.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the benefits of journaling?
Yeah, absolutely. The benefits that I see, and I've seen that has helped my students, it really helps them reflect. So it really helps them think about, are they on track? Are they doing what they need to be doing? Because there's so many things that they need to do as they prepare for their application. Mm-hmm. And it helps them kind of assess themselves, helps them develop effective ways of doing things. And it also helps them look at what they're doing well. It helps them see that they've done what they've needed to do, or it also helps them see that they need to add in more shadowing, or they need to gain different experiences. And also it helps them go deeper into those experiences to reflect on them, to be able to really think about them, to keep a shadowing log, have an activity description in it. It gives them a reference point for their application. Mm-hmm. It can help them relieve stress and anxiety, like I talked about in the last podcast I was on. Yeah. And it keeps them on track. It's because the journal and the bullet journaling that we'll talk about here in a little bit, it helps them look at what they want to do in the future. It helps them look at what they've done in the past, but it also helps them organize their present time. It helps them track their time. It also helps them stay on track so they're not, going out and doing things that aren't, helpful to their application, or, for example, binge watching Netflix, or, derailing from their MCAT studying time, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's always good to do little things like that now and then to take care of self. But when you're doing it to a degree that gets you off track, the journaling can help you really look at that to keep you on track.
Yeah, when it's a weekly Friends or The Office 10-hour marathon, I think there's some reevaluation that needs to happen there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you
We've all
mentioned,
been there.
I am totally guilty of that. But when we're talking about pre-health students, they've got a really tight schedule that they need to adhere to, and so it's very important that they do that personal reflection and kind of work out the areas of their schedule that they need to maximize their time in. And as you mentioned, still make time for different leisurely activities. It helps to keep the stress levels down, but being a lot more cognizant of the amount of time that you have devoted to that is really important.
Yeah,
Now,
and also I was gonna tell you, it can help them change, like look at changes and look at what needs to change in their day to day. And in addition, when they interview, they can also use their journal to look back at their experiences on their day of interview.
yeah, that's a great point. And the past series that we just finished up is on the roadmap to professional school, and so we covered what each academic year the applicant should be doing to prepare, and then what non-traditional students can take away from that. And so this has been a really the practice of journaling is actually something that you can go back and listen to those previous episodes, figure out where you are, and then implement those into your journaling habits. And I think that's a really great transition into bullet journaling, which you just mentioned a little while ago. Uh, can you tell us a little bit more about bullet journal?
Yeah, bullet journaling is a really good way to get your thoughts on paper. It can be minimalistic, but it can also be like really creative. It just depends on the person and what their needs are for their journaling. It helps them declutter their mind. It helps them to see things visually, and it is customizable to their needs. Ryder Carroll is the person who developed bullet journaling, and he really gave it a think framework or a think visually framework as an idea. And it just really helps the person to plan and look at their needs. It can be monthly, it can be weekly, it can be daily. It can have a spending tracker for money. It can have a checklist. It can have, things that are motivational to you that you've seen throughout the day or week, resources you want to go back to. It's really yours, and anything you can tailor it to you, and really customize it. The bullet journaling too allows and leads to reflection, as I mentioned before, and can lead to action. So if you use your bullet journaling for free writing and have that stream of consciousness and just write things out, you can get so far just by writing and not even really thinking about what you're writing, or just writing down your thoughts, even if it's one sentence or one word. It can get you into a reflection mode, and then that reflection mode is really what leads you to action.
I love that. And if I can kind of interject an experience that someone that I've been working with shared with me is that in journaling, he was actually finding that there were different, essentially, tasks that he had to accomplish in order to get to his goal. And so one day he was actually shadowing, he was with a healthcare team. And so there was a nurse, a PA, and a doctor. And the doctor and the PA did not speak Spanish, but the patient needed somebody who could help translate. And so the nurse was actually fluent in both English and Spanish, and so he served as the middle person to be able to translate all that. And so what this student took away from that is that he really kind of needs to step up his Spanish a little bit more, and seeing that he already came from a background where he had Spanish knowledge, he was just thinking about maybe I should do medical terminology in Spanish and really understand that a little bit better. And so that's kind of the reflection that he took from that entire situation. And now he was able to take classes and, enhance that knowledge base. And so that's going to make him a more effective healthcare professional in the future. And so that's kind of the personal reflection life cycle that happens in each one of these activities, and it's extremely helpful. As you've mentioned, especially when you sit down in the TMDSAS application and we ask you to recall every activity you've been a part of since since your first day of college.
And that can be overwhelming for somebody when they sit down to first do that. And by keeping the bullet journal, and they can look back at all of that. They can bring that into their application. It really helps you remember what you've done. And sometimes it just rejogs your memory. And it can really be valuable in your application when you're sitting down to do it.
Yeah. Now, can I dig a little bit more into how the bullet journaling experience can be really customized to each individual? You mentioned that, you can be as minimalistic or as creative with the whole practice as you'd like to be. Maybe do you have any practices that you do in your journaling? And also I can jump in with my own experiences as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my own journal it is a dot journal. So you can get those at really anywhere. You can get them on Amazon, Target, Walmart, HEB. And I basically divide mine into 3 different blocks. So I draw 2 lines across the page. So I have 3 different squares. I look at what I need to be doing. Maybe in that day, I try to do mine daily, but sometimes it ends up weekly. And what I need to do. Then I look at what it is that I have accomplished. And I also look at who I need to connect with. I write down thoughts and motivational sayings that have come across to me to keep me motivated so I can look back at it later. And then in the bottom, I keep resources. So if I get a recommendation of a book or a recommendation of a podcast, a video to watch or anything like that, or an article to read, I'll jot it down there. So then I go back and I don't lose that. Because so often we have things go in one ear and out the other and it doesn't cement. And so it's just a really good tool for me to go back and look at. My daughter also bullet journals, and she does it by month. Oh, wow. And she'll draw different things that she wants to accomplish in that month and have motivational words and sayings. And then when she goes back for that, she looks at it every month. And when she goes back, she looks at what she's accomplished and circles them or underlines them or checks them off. But it also gets it out there. And so one of the things is if we hold the secret within us, right, and we never share it with anybody, we tend not to move on the action. But as soon as we write it down or share it with somebody else, we start to move on those actions and move towards towards the doing of the activity or thing we want to accomplish. And so that's kind of one of the powers I see in bullet journaling. But it can be, mine is a to-do list. My daughter's is very creative. And that's just to illustrate 2 different ways. So Enrique, how do you do yours?
I actually do a yearly spread so I can keep track of everybody's birthdays. And then I do a monthly where I can kind of track the big things that I need to accomplish in a certain month. And then depending on how many tasks I have to accomplish that month, I also go down to weekly, but I definitely don't do daily. It's too much for me. But I think my favorite part of my bullet journal is that, and it's going to sound really cheesy, but I have like affirmations that I kind of come across. Sometimes somebody will say something really nice or send me a thank you email or thank you note or a message. And I actually, this is going to show my age, but I go and I like print it off and I cut it out and I paste it into my bullet journal. I'm like, okay, Enrique, you're on the right path. And so I've got about 10 pages committed to doing that. And so, and it's not necessarily something that's huge or a huge affirmation. It could just be like, I booked tickets to this concert that I really wanted to go to, or I went to go watch this movie and I really enjoyed it. And it's just like little it's almost like a miniature happiness journal that I keep in there. So it kind of helps you battle those inner demons of self-doubt every once in a while, and that's something that I fall victim to often. So bullet journaling's really helped me with um, staying on the right track of what I need to accomplish, and it's been
Mhm.
really helpful because I have a list of podcast episode topics. I have a list of different resources we need to develop here at TMDSAS, and so that's quite a bit of work that's going into that. And so it's really helpful to have like individual task lists for all of these different projects, and all of this lives in the same journal. So it's really helpful to keep everything in one place for me. But uh, you know, other people prefer to separate their professional and their personal lives. Other people have different journals for different projects. There's no right way and there's no wrong way to do the journaling, and that's something that I
Exactly.
really love about this. And if if our listeners are interested in different options for journaling, YouTube is really ripe with a lot of options. You can find people who spend hours drawing out their monthly spreads. And by the same token, you can find people who, write out their tasks line by line using the bullet journal method, and, keep it very minimalistic. And so
That
just
would be me.
whatever works for you is what you should pursue.
Mm-hmm. I was going to tell you too. I had one of my students recently tell me that she'd been bullet journaling and just taken it up, and she bought a bunch of different colored of like the fine point Sharpies, and would organize it by color, but also would doodle a little bit in it, and that was giving her kind of a relaxation, mind relief, but it was also helping her organize. So it was having a dual purpose for her, and then it was able to keep her on track with what she needed to do specifically for her MCAT study.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great applications for this, and I think ultimately the call to action from this episode is that you go out and seek the ways that a journal like this can work for you, whether it be a bullet journal method or if it's just a task list being kept or a log of your activities being kept. What's important is that you take the time to log these different things that you need to do and then reflect on how those are affecting you and what it is that you as a pre-health student or as a future healthcare provider can take away from your current experiences and apply them into your application and into your practice later on.
Absolutely. And, also I was going to say, if writing things down or carrying a journal isn't what you want to do, there's definitely alternatives to do this. You can use your phone. You can use memos in your phone. You can have Evernote app, OneNote, Google Keep. There's a plethora of things out there that you can use to find one that works for you. Ryder Carroll also developed a bullet journal companion app to use alongside your bullet journal. But there's also one called InkFlow Visual Notebook that I thought was really, really good. It allowed you to kind of track everything and have visual pictures in there as well. There's Day One Journal, Grid Diary. Just, check them out. If the hard, notebook next to you isn't what works for you. But I think also just trying it out, seeing what works best, try different methods until you land on one. It's just about doing it and practicing. And, as you continue to go, it can be difficult at first, but as you continue, it really kind of becomes easier with your practice, and it can actually result in a happier, more efficient you.
Yeah. And those of you that would rather use electronic means of keeping a journal have that option as well. All right. I think those are the major topics that we wanted to cover in this episode of the podcast. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Shannon?
The last thing that I did want to add is I wanted to share some questions for the students to ask themselves to start them on reflection. This is a good way that they could start their bullet journaling and just really start to work on reflection and ask themselves these things. So they, could ask themselves, what are my strengths? And just write down the first thing that comes to their mind. They could ask themselves, what are their weaknesses? What are their skills? What skills do I have and what am I good at? They can actually ask themselves what problems are there at work or school or home that may affect me. Sometimes we don't even think about what affects us. Can think about, that could be distractions that may impact studying or something that's holding you back from finding shadowing, stuff like that. Achievement. So that's a big one. What have I achieved? What have I done? That's one that a lot of people struggle with looking at. And then happiness. What are the things I'm unhappy with or disappointed in? But also what makes me happy is a good thing to start looking at. And then last but not least is solutions. Asking what could I do to improve in these areas? And it could be one area, it could be 5 areas, it could be something that you want to just improve on, like your Spanish skills, like you mentioned earlier. But just starting with asking yourself these questions can help you reflect. And when you reflect, it helps you in all different areas of your life. It'll help you in your interviewing for your health profession. It'll help you be able to write your personal statement. It goes everywhere. It's pervasive when you reflect, and it helps you grow as a person. And that's the call to action that I have is just, start somewhere. And even if it's just writing down these answers to these questions in a journal to start, it at least gets you on that pathway and journey.
Love that. Thank you very much for sharing that. If I may add some as well, the purpose of journaling is to be more focused on your environment. By removing all of these distractions and committing them to paper, you're essentially freeing up that mind space. And so you don't have to be distracted by other things about what you need to do because it's all in your journal. And so when you're in a shadowing experience, for example, you can actually be in the moment and really engage with the patients, with the healthcare professionals that you're working with, and be much more intentional in how you act. And that's one of the key elements that Dr. Wright is going to talk to us about soon on the podcast, about the mindfulness challenge, where we are much more engaged and deliberate about what it is that we're doing in the present, and really being a part of the environment that you're in, rather than having your mind wander around. And so that's one of the reasons that I find journaling to be really effective, is that I don't have to keep all of these things in my mind and worrying about what it is that I need to do or making sure that I remember something, because I know that it's all in one place. And so I think ultimately practice with it, do some trial and error. But the most important part is that you get started with journaling and doing that personal reflection and getting in the habit of that. Because in the admissions world, that really shows a growth mindset. And it's a practice that it will come back to you and pay back in dividends. And it really is going to benefit you, not just as a health professional, but as a person.
Absolutely.
Well, Shannon, thank you so much again for taking the time to talk to us about this and boosting up our personal development skills. Really thank you for your time.
Thank you, Enrique.
When it comes down to journaling, you have to remember that it's designed to help you reduce the complexities and gain clarity in what you are experiencing. And when it comes to your pre-health journey, there's a lot of complexity and there are a lot of things that need to be clarified. So journaling really aligns itself well in that realm. Don't forget that the benefits of journaling are to reflect and to think about where you are in the process and how well you are on the track to getting there, and to develop effective ways of doing things. You can also dig deeper and use journaling to your advantage by keeping a log of all of the activities that you're doing, which will come in handy when you have to fill out the application, whether it be the TMDSAS application or AMCAS, ACOMAS, ADSAS. Every application service is going to ask you about your activities and the amount of time that you've contributed to them. In the description of this episode, we're including some resources for folks who are interested in bullet journaling. As I've mentioned, personally, bullet journaling has been a really transformative experience for me because it allows me to put all of my thoughts, tasks, and ideas into a single place. And because of the way that it's indexed, it allows me to come back to them whenever I need them. And so check out some of these resources on the bullet journal method and the bullet journal companion. I've also included a link to the Apply magazine article that I wrote on journaling your way to success. And we've also included some of the apps that Ms. Gutheil mentioned on helping you with taking notes electronically and keeping a journal electronically. The TMDSAS podcast is produced in the TMDSAS office in Austin, Texas. We are part of the MedEd Media Network, your source for informational, inspirational, and motivational pre-med podcasts and more. Check out some of the other podcasts in the MedEd Media Network, such as Session 337 of the pre-med years, How to Overcome Test Anxiety and Take Back Control. There's a lot of great overlap in this episode that, when paired with journaling habits, can really help you address a lot of the anxieties that you experience before you go into a test setting. A link to that episode is in the description. On behalf of everyone here at the Texas Health Education Service and TMDSAS, we'd like to wish all of our applicants all the best of luck. That's all for today. We'll talk to you later.
This is MedEd Media.